Our trigger component works, but we have a small problem with it. What if we wanted to use an image instead of an I tag with the class attached to represent an icon? At the moment, we're using font awesome, and if we go to the trigger, you may remember we've used this I tag with those classes associated with it. Now, if we wanted to add the image, obviously there's no way to do it. So what we're going to do is refactor this trigger component to make it a little bit more flexible. So the first thing we're going to do from within the trigger component, we're going to put two slots within this span tag. First one, slot, and it's going to have a name, because we're going to be using name slots, label on, and it will only show when we are not processing the request. And by default, we're going to put I with the class fas, fa check, and then fa fw, and then after this, we're going to have submit. So now what we can do is remove this default resting label, and we can remove resting icon. We're going to do the same for the working label and for the working icon. These will no longer be needed. So let's duplicate this slot, and the other will be label off, and it will show when the request is being processed, and the icon will be, rather than check, it's going to be fa spinner, fa spin, so it's rotating, and then the label will be, default label will be processing. Okay, so that's fine. Now resting CSS class, what we are going to do is change it from required false to default. We're going to change it. By default, it's going to be button. And if we scroll down, now let's have a look at our computed properties. Let's now remove this label computed property because we no longer need it. And now let's simplify this CSS class here when we check in whether the working class is present, and then we use it. Otherwise, we're using this resting CSS class with the disabled class. We can simplify this by using this OR operated, two pipes. And that's everything within our trigger. Now let's go back to our form buttons detached, and let's start with this form trigger. First of all, resting label no longer applies because we either going to specify one through the slots or we use the default ones. Same for the resting icon and working icon. We will leave resting CSS class, and we are going to use the same class for when the request is being processed. The only difference will be that we will attach disabled. Obviously, if we go back, you'll see that we're going to use resting class plus disabled class attached to it. Okay, so that's our form trigger because I want to use default values. So it's going to be submit and processing with these icons for the form trigger. The next thing we're going to do is refactor these two. So again, we're going to remove those resting icon, working icon plus the resetting label. We'll leave the alert button class, and within the form trigger, this is where we're going to add our slots, the replacements for the slots. And we are going to use the template tag because we don't want the content that we're actually going to put into those slots to be wrapped with any specific tag. We just want the content there rather than having a span div or any other tag wrapping it. That's why we're using the template. And we are going to use the slot attribute to specify which slot is it for, which named slot is it for, and this one will be for label on. And for label on, what I want to have is the icon as well, and I'm going to be still using font awesome, so fas fa eraser, and it's going to be fa-fw. But again, now you would be able to specify the image path if you wanted to use the image tag. And the label itself will be reset. And that's everything, because for the label off, I want to use the default one, which is the processing with the spinner. The same thing goes for the clear button, so I'm removing those redundant properties. I'm keeping resting CSS class, and let's just copy what we have for this reset one. Again, template for label on, I want fa times icon, and the button label will be clear. And if we save everything, if we now open our terminal and run npm run dev, and once everything's compiled, let's have a look at the result in the browser. And as you can see, we don't see the labels. Let's quickly have a look at what might be causing this. And in the console, we see that property or method label is not defined on the instance, but reference. Let's go back to our editor. And if we scroll up, you can see we're still using this label property, which we don't have anymore. I've forgotten to remove it. Let's save it. Let's recompile assets. And let's preview everything in the browser again, refresh. Now the error is gone and our buttons are still working. So if I click on submit, that submits, resetting, clearing, everything seems to be working fine. But with the added flexibility of being able to put whatever we want for the icon and the label, rather than being coupled with the specific implementation. If you would like to learn more about the Vue's name slots, navigate to vue.js.org and search for the name slots. You'll find the full specification for it.